the great Bob Marley. He was Robert. He was more of a laid back, stand back and watch you type. And no, don't even talk to me.
After Bob Marley died, dozens of women and children came forward, each claiming to share his blood. Most were dismissed because there was no proof and real connection. But one case hit Rita Marley hard. A DNA result surfaced and it changed everything. Bob's widow refused to accept the child, not because she didn't know Bob had other kids, but because this one came from a woman she couldn't stand. Let's find out what happened. Rita Marley had accepted long ago that Bob wasn't only hers. In Jamaica, it was common for men to have children with different women, even while married. People called the women baby mothers and the men baby fathers, and no one really made a big deal about it. Life just went on. So, it wasn't surprising that Bob lived that kind of life. But after he died, things got complicated. He left behind his wife, Rita, and 7 baby mothers. When the court settled things, they recognized only 11 children as Bob's legal heirs. Out of those 11, only 3 were Rita's children with Bob Marley, Cedella, Ziggy, and Steve. The rest came from different women. Cindy Breakspear, a former Miss World, had Damien. Janet, who lived in Jamaica, gave birth to Rohan, the same Rohan who later played football in the US. Rita even helped raise some of the other children, like Karen, who was born to Janet in England. Pat Williams had Robbie. Anita had Kamani. Lucy, who also lived in England, gave birth to Julian. Then there was Stephanie. Rita had her while she was with another man, but Bob accepted her and adopted the child as his own. And those were just the ones people knew about. There were rumors of other women, some the names were never mentioned, and children Rita had never met. A year later after Bob's death, DNA tests would uncover what anyone had not expected. Bob had a secret child after he died. Over time, most of the women in Bob Marley's life became known to the family, especially after his passing, when court hearings began to settle the matter of his estate. But there were 2 women in particular who stood out: Cindy Breakspear and Yvette. Cindy was no ordinary woman. Even before she was crowned Miss World in 1976, her beauty was already famous across Jamaica. Tall, athletic, and confident, she carried herself like someone who knew the power she held. Breakspear and Marley met when she lived at 56 Hope Road in Kingston with her older brother. This address would become more than just a place to stay. It was where her life would change forever. Behind their building, a band rehearsed daily. That band was none other than the Wailers, led by the rising reggae icon, Bob Marley. As time passed, Cindy and Bob grew close. Their friendship slowly became something deeper, and soon, their lives were woven together. The first time Bob mentioned her, he was in the US, stopping over on his way back from England. He made a quick phone call to Jamaica, and after talking for a bit, handed the phone to a relative to say hello to Cindy. It was the first small sign that Cindy was more than just another name. Later on, when Bob settled into his new house in Coral Gables, Florida, Cindy came to visit him. They didn't hide their closeness. They laughed together, swam in the pool, and looked completely wrapped up in each other. Not long after that, Cindy found out she was pregnant. There was one moment Cindy would never forget. She was with Bob at Essex House in New York City when she got a phone call that would change her life. The caller told her she had been chosen to compete in the 1976 Miss World pageant. That moment of joy, filled with hope and new beginnings, happened with Bob right by her side, and soon after, she would go on to win the crown. When people across Jamaica found out about Bob and Cindy, the news spread like fire. Cindy was an uptown girl from St. Andrew, a well-off neighborhood where life was quiet and clean. Bob came from Trenchtown, a tough part of Kingston. He was seen as a ghetto youth, a voice for the poor. The match didn't make sense to many people. She was light-skinned and came from a well-to-do family, while Bob was the rebel Rasta who sang about struggle and freedom. Even Rita Marley, Bob's wife, would refer to Cindy as a white woman, and that label followed her everywhere. This happened in the 1970s, when Jamaica was on the edge. The country was deep in political tension under Michael Manley's socialist government. People were split, black versus white, rich versus poor, uptown versus downtown. That divide ran deep, and Bob's relationship with a fair-skinned beauty queen like Cindy stirred things up. Wherever you went in Kingston, from the markets to the music shops, people were talking. Some supported Bob's choices. Others felt betrayed. In Cedella Booker's book, Bob Marley, My Son, she shared a moment that captured the anger. One day, Rita Marley and Peter Tosh were talking about Bob and Cindy. Peter didn't hold back because he couldn't understand how a Rasta man like Bob could be with a white woman. He felt it went against everything they stood for, and he was so upset. He said he would march right down to 56 Hope Road, Bob's home, and speak his mind, no matter what. Rita and her companion left Peter Tosh behind and went about their errands across Kingston. They didn't think much of it, but later that same day, as they passed through Halfway Tree, they saw Peter again. He hadn't let go of the anger. He told them he was still planning to go confront Bob and Cindy at 56 Hope Road. According to the book, Rita and her friend made it to the house before him. Word got to Bob quickly that Peter was on his way and might be bringing trouble, but Bob didn't seem bothered. He looked up and simply asked, "Peter fussing?" Then he smiled lightly, like it was just another day. A few minutes later, Peter walked into the yard. But something had changed. He wasn't loud and he wasn't angry. Instead of shouting, he walked over to Bob calmly. They started talking, not about Cindy, not about women, not about conflict. They spoke about music. The two old friends sat in a corner of the yard, heads close together, voices low. When the talk was over, Peter stood up quietly and left, just as calmly as he had arrived. But while things stayed calm between Bob and Peter, there was another storm brewing, this time inside Cindy's family. After Damien was born, the tension began to show more clearly. On one occasion, Cindy had a guest over for lunch. During the visit, the guest spoke directly to Cindy's mother and mentioned something that changed the air in the room. Bob is married to Rita. Cindy's mother looked shocked. She seemed completely unaware that Bob had a wife. But the guest didn't believe her surprise. She reminded her that Bob Marley was always in the news, that his marriage wasn't a secret. His life, after all, was constantly in the public eye. Cindy had been quiet through the awkward lunch conversation, but after a moment, she finally spoke. She admitted that she had heard Bob was married, but said he never confirmed it to her directly. She also said she didn't mind having his children. In fact, she shared that she wanted a big family, maybe even 10 kids someday. Her mother, clearly frustrated, muttered under her breath. She said Bob was trying to have everything both ways. Someone else at the table tried to smooth things over. They said Bob was a man, and men sometimes acted like that. But they also added that just because a man behaves a certain way doesn't mean a woman has to accept it. Cindy's mother didn't seem satisfied with that answer, but by the time the visit ended, the tension had softened just a little. Still, with Bob's life being so public and his relationships overlapping, it was only a matter of time before awkward moments happened, and one day, it did. It happened between Rita and Cindy. At the time, Cindy was staying with Bob in Miami, at the house he had bought for his mother. Everything had been calm until a sudden phone call changed that. Rita was on the line. She said she was flying in from Jamaica with the kids and would be arriving soon. Cindy panicked. She didn't know what to do. Part of her wanted to leave before Rita arrived, just to avoid drama. But she was told not to worry that Rita wouldn't cause a scene. By then, things had shifted between Bob and Rita. They were no longer living together. Rita stayed in Bull Bay, while Bob was still at 56 Hope Road. Even Rita had started seeing someone else, a man named Ital, but she was trying to keep that part of her life hidden from Bob. When Rita finally arrived at the Miami house, Bob stopped staying in the bedroom with Cindy. Instead, he gave her space. That night, he slept on the sofa or even on the carpet in the drawing room, lying next to his children. At the breakfast and dinner table, everything seemed peaceful. People passed the food, made small talk, and smiled politely. There were no sharp words or awkward glances. If there was any tension between Rita and Cindy, it didn't show on the surface. But even with all the calm on the outside, Cindy must have felt uncomfortable. Ever since Rita and the children arrived, Bob hadn't returned to their shared bedroom. Cindy now slept alone, and the silence in that space probably said more than words ever could. After a few days, she quietly packed her things and left. She understood that as long as Rita and the kids were there, Bob wouldn't be by her side, not while his wife was just down the hall. That wasn't the only time things got difficult. On another occasion, Cindy came with a complaint. She asked why Bob had lied to her. When someone asked what she meant, Cindy said she had heard that Bob bought Rita a brand new BMW for her birthday. It hurt her. She felt pushed aside. Meanwhile, Bob had been pressing Rita to tell the truth about something that had bothered him. For a long time, whether or not Stephanie, the youngest child in their home, was truly his. Rita had always insisted she was, but On this particular day, maybe because everything had already reached a boiling point, Rita finally admitted it. Stephanie's real father was Ital. All this drama was happening in the middle of their tour. Behind the scenes, emotions were raw and tempers were high. But when night came and the stage lights turned on, Bob and Rita still walked out together. They sang like nothing was wrong, giving the audience a show full of energy and love, while hiding all the pain no one else could see. Cindy had become Miss World. She was graceful, confident, and admired across the globe. But even with all of that, many people still saw her as just one thing, the other woman. It wasn't a role she asked for, but it was one she couldn't escape. And though her bond with Bob had grown stronger, he wasn't there when their son Damien was born. At that time, Bob was out touring, sharing reggae music with the world. Cindy stayed strong. She raised Damien with love and purpose, even though her heart carried the weight of a love that didn't last. She walked through life knowing that Bob had another world, another home, and a wife he had never left. Still, she pressed on. She gave Damien love, peace, and protection. She made sure he felt safe, even though the man whose last name he carried belonged to another woman. If you are enjoying this video, appreciate it by giving it a thumbs up. And if you have not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. After Bob Marley moved on from Cindy, there was Yvette, a woman Bob met while he was in California. Before meeting Bob, Yvette had been a radio DJ in Berkeley and once dated singer Johnny Nash. She was light-skinned, from Philadelphia, and full of energy. She talked a lot, moved fast, and never seemed to sit still. After she got close to Bob, she also became close to his mother and started visiting her often in Delaware. Sometimes Yvette would show up when Bob was home, and when that happened, she slept in his room. If Bob was away on tour, she stayed in one of the guest rooms. Bob's mother didn't mind her visits at first. Yvette was cheerful, full of jokes, and kept the house lively with her talking and bright personality. It was nice having someone around who brought a little spark into the home, but eventually things turned sour. Bob and Yvette had a falling out, and he was done with her. But Yvette wasn't done with Bob or his mother. She kept holding on tightly, like a crab refusing to let go. She would send long letters to Bob's mom, sometimes 3 or 4 pages, and call the house regularly. Even when Bob came back from tour and saw the letters, he'd raise an eyebrow and ask, "What's Yvette writing to you about now?" At that time, Bob and his team had permanently moved to Miami, and the flood of fan mail had gotten out of control. Letters from all over the world poured in, and it was becoming impossible to manage. They knew they needed a system, a better way to reply to everyone. But Bob didn't like the idea of calling it a fan club. To him, it felt too flashy and self-important. So, instead, they created something new, an organization called the Movement of Jah People. It was meant to handle all the fan mail and connect people to the message in Bob's music. Bob's mother believed Yvette would be perfect for helping with the fan mail. She already had experience in public relations, and as a former DJ, she knew Bob's music inside and out. She also had a way with words and people, which made her seem like the right fit. So, Bob's mother reached out and asked if she'd be interested in coming to Miami to work for the Movement of Jah People. Yvette was excited about the offer. She told Bob's mother she was about to visit Johnny Nash at his horse farm, but after that, she'd come straight to Miami. Soon, she was living in the house and working for the organization, sorting and replying to letters sent by fans from around the world. But whatever had been between Yvette and Bob before was clearly over. He barely paid her any attention. He moved through the house on his own schedule, coming in when he was recording or leaving for tour, and Yvette stayed busy with her work. They would bump into each other in the kitchen, pass by each other on the patio, maybe exchange a few polite words, but that was all. Bob's bedroom door stayed closed, and Yvette didn't go near it. Most days went smoothly, but Yvette had a side to her that could be difficult. She could be quick-tempered, and sometimes her words came out sharp. When that happened, Bob's mother didn't hesitate to check her. One afternoon, for example, Bob's mother asked Yvette to call the dentist and schedule an appointment. Later that day, they were riding together in the Cadillac. Bob's mother brought it up again, just a simple reminder about the phone call, but Yvette snapped. Instead of answering calmly, she rolled her eyes and replied with attitude, asking if the phone cord was tied to her, then finished her sentence with a curse word. It was a small thing, but enough to shift the mood. Bob's mother didn't take kindly to that kind of disrespect. Bob's mother couldn't believe what she had just heard. She asked, "Who are you talking to?" And before she could stop herself, her hand flew across Yvette's face. The slap landed hard, not because she meant to hurt her, but because she forgot she had a ring on. The sharp edge of the ring left a red mark on Yvette's cheek. Yvette gasped, shocked, and then burst into tears. In her panic, she jerked the steering wheel and slammed the Cadillac to the side of the road. After bashing the car, Bob's mother shouted, "Get out! Get out of my car right now!" Yvette didn't say a word. She jumped out, slammed the door behind her, and stood on the side of the road. Bob's mother slid over to the driver's seat, got behind the wheel, and drove herself home. Later that same day, Yvette showed up at the house. She said she was there to pack her things and leave. Yvette walked into her room and began pretending to pack. She tugged clothes off hangers, opened drawers, and made a lot of noise, but she wasn't really taking anything. It was all for show. Bob's mother just sat and watched, not saying a word. Then, out of nowhere, a large man wearing a uniform appeared in the hallway. Bob's mother looked up, confused. She asked, "Wait, who's this now? That's not a police officer, is it?" One of the men explained that they had received a call from a woman named Yvette. She said an older woman in the house had hit her and tried to fight. Bob's mother looked the man straight in the eye and smiled gently. She said, "Now, officer, take a good look at me. I'm an old woman. And now look at that big young girl. You really think I could fight her? You really think I could beat her?" The officer looked back and forth between them, clearly unsure. The two officers walked out, got into their car, and drove off. After they left, Bob's mother turned to Yvette and said, "Why would you bring police into my house?" Yvette burst into tears, letting out loud, dramatic sobs. But later, things calmed down. The shouting faded, and forgiveness came. They returned to working together on the movement of Ja people. Yvette moved into her own apartment, where she could have guests freely. She had a boyfriend named Vincent who visited often, and another young man called L.A. who was deeply in love with her. Yvette was clearly taken with L.A. too. Once, Bob's mother overheard her asking her own mother if L.A. was too young for her to marry. One Saturday, Yvette came by and invited Bob to come see her new apartment. The two of them drove off together in Yvette's car. Time passed. Bob went on tour. Then came the terrible moment when he collapsed in Central Park. The diagnosis was devastating. The cancer in his toe had spread to his brain, lungs, and liver. There was no hope left. Shortly after, Marley's health deteriorated as his cancer had spread throughout his body. The rest of the tour was canceled, and Marley sought treatment at the Joseph Issels' clinic in Rottach-Egern, Bavaria, Germany, where he underwent an alternative cancer treatment called Issels treatment, partly based on avoidance of certain foods, fluids, and other substances. During the painful period after Bob's condition worsened, his mother reached out to Yvette by phone. Yvette answered in tears, saying she couldn't talk at the moment, but would call back. When she did, still crying, she suddenly revealed that she was pregnant. Bob's mother asked who the father was. Yvette said she believed it might be Bob. His mother immediately dismissed it as a lie. Yvette admitted she wasn't completely sure and said she needed to check her diary. Bob's mother told her to go ahead and check. Yvette later confirmed her story. According to her, the baby was Bob's, and it was due on May 11th. She claimed it happened the day she took Bob to see her new apartment. At Bob's request, his mother traveled to Germany to care for him during his illness. While there, she told him what Yvette had said, that she was pregnant and believed the child was his. Bob responded that Yvette hadn't told him the child was his, only that she was expecting. His mother promised him that if the baby turned out to be his, she would help take care of it. 2 weeks after Bob's death, Yvette came to show her the newborn baby she'd named Makeda. The child was beautiful, a healthy, happy baby girl. After that visit, Yvette moved to Philadelphia and vanished for a while. Meanwhile, the battles over Bob's estate had started. His mother found herself struggling just to hold on to the home Bob had given her, as the estate's lawyers moved to take it back. Out of the blue, Yvette called again. She was frantic and in tears, saying the baby was hungry and she had no money. She was considering going on welfare. Bob's mother was furious. She warned her not to take Bob's name down to any welfare office, then agreed to send some temporary support, but only until they could confirm whether the child was really Bob's. Yvette soon hired a lawyer and filed a legal claim. arguing that her daughter should be counted among Bob's heirs. For months, Rita refused to sign any papers acknowledging Bob's fatherhood. Yvette took a blood test, but the results were unclear. She was told that nothing was certain, and anyone could have been the father. And as Jamaicans say, death cut words. Bob was no longer here to speak for himself. Even with Yvette constantly calling and begging for help for her newborn, Bob's mother couldn't stop thinking about the child. The baby hadn't asked to be born into a life full of adult arguments, questions about who her father was, and uncertainty about her future. For the child's sake, she agreed to persuade Rita to sign the papers that recognized Bob as the father. Meanwhile, Rita kept her distance from Yvette, both before and after Bob's death. To her, Yvette was just one more woman in Bob's life, one more frustration, one more quiet stab of jealousy. When the legal papers about Makeda came up again, Rita refused to sign. Instead, she brought them to Bob's mother and said gently, "You do what you think is right, Mom. You were there. I wasn't." And so, for the child's sake, Bob's mother signed. Still, even if Rita never clashed openly with Yvette the way she had with Cindy, the tension still existed. It didn't start during that time. One moment between Rita and Bob made it clear how deep the cracks had grown. At the time, Rita was pregnant with Stephanie, a child conceived while Bob was in England. Bob called Rita, and the two of them spoke on the phone for a long time. But underneath their conversation, there was quiet tension. Rita had heard a rumor that Bob was planning to marry Yvette so he could get permanent U.S. papers. At the same time, Bob was suspicious about Rita's pregnancy. According to Cedella Booker's book, Bob Marley, My Son, from what she could gather while listening to his side of the call, the exchange sounded like a tug of war between two people who no longer trusted each other. Rita brought up what she'd heard, that Bob was going to marry a white woman. Bob responded by pointing out that she was pregnant and wanted to know who the father was. She didn't answer the question directly, but instead asked whether Bob had told the other woman that he was already married or if he was keeping it a secret. Bob fired back that while he was working in England, she had gotten pregnant in Jamaica and wanted to know why she was hiding the truth. Rita reminded him that a man couldn't marry two women at the same time because that would get him locked up. Bob answered that a married woman shouldn't be getting pregnant when her husband isn't even around. The two of them kept going back and forth until Bob got tired of the argument and passed the phone to his mother. On the line, Rita's voice still carried a sarcastic tone. She said she'd heard that Bob was planning to marry a white woman. His mother asked who she was talking about, and Rita snapped that she already knew, and maybe the girl was even right there, listening to the call as they spoke. And in a way, Rita was partly right. Yvette was staying in the house at the time, spending time with Bob. Well, in '92, more than a decade after Bob's death, Rita Marley officially recognized Yvette's daughter, Makeda, as one of Bob's children. With that recognition, Makeda was added as an official beneficiary of the Marley estate. But life didn't go smoothly for Makeda. When she turned 18, she received a trust fund from her father's estate. For a while, it helped, but eventually the money ran out. Years later in court, she admitted she had spent it all. She was working as a waitress just to make ends meet. Then in 2008, her name made headlines, not because of her famous last name, but because of trouble with the law. Police came to her home in the Philadelphia area after a domestic dispute, but when they looked around, they found dozens of illegal plants, far more than what could be called personal use. Makeda was arrested. She later pleaded guilty and spent a few weeks in jail. She found a way to move forward. Today, Makeda lives in New Jersey, where she runs a substance business, this time fully legal under state law. She also works as a DJ and uses her voice to speak to others as a motivational speaker, sharing her story, her struggles, and her legacy as the daughter of Bob Marley. What do you think of Bob Marley's life with other women? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest content.